And we are live. Welcome everybody who is just joining us. I'm going to introduce Lisa Decker to the group, and she will let you know more about our webinar today.
Hi everyone, I am Lisa Decker and I am a certified divorce financial analyst with Divorce Money Matters and also the founder of Divorcetown USA, who is the sponsor of this webinar. We are really excited to have you here today because we have some fantastic guests who are going to talk about some really important issues about co-parenting sanely and successfully, because isn't that the goal, to help our children and ourselves to get through these difficult times and come out of it and the best light possible on the other side, and have our children grow up and be sane and successful along with ourselves. So I have some great professionals in my network that I am so proud to have with us here today, and I'm going to introduce each of them, and then they will go ahead and do their presentation for you. And at the end, we will also have a Q&A time. So I appreciate if you have questions, you can type them in the chat box as we go, or you can hold them till the end and ask then. You can find all of the professionals here and more at divorcetownusa.com. So first up, we have Andrew Mcconaughey. Andrew and his wife, Tracy, are the owners of Mcconaughey Counseling in Alpharetta, Georgia. Andrew specializes in couples counseling, including working with couples before, during, and following their divorce. Andrew and Tracy are also the co-founders of the Upside Down Divorce, and I'll let him explain a little bit more about that, which is a healthy and amicable divorce process focused on the emotional and relational needs of the family. And Andrew, I'm going to let you take it away from here. And I would ask to our other speakers if you could just turn your camera and audio off until I call you up next. All right, thank you, Andrew.
Okay, thanks, Lisa. So as Lisa said, my primary area is couples counseling, and I've been working with couples in all different parts of their relationship, including their and when they get a divorce or after they have a divorce, they have a parenting plan. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about parenting plans and what I believe are the best ways to approach parenting plans and also co-parenting. So I'm going to first talk about some different ways to divorce and the best ways, in my opinion, to develop a parenting plan. When people get divorced, they need really two big documents. One is a parenting plan, which is essentially the agreement related to how are they going to co-parent post-divorce. And secondarily, there's the financial agreement. So I want to focus on parenting plans today. The best way, in my opinion, to do your parenting plan is to use a mental health counselor who's trained and has experience in developing parenting plans. There are a handful of counselors that are trained to do parenting plans, and and I will later in today I will get to why I believe that's the best way to do your parenting plan. And then once you, as parents, have a parenting plan, you can bring it to your divorce attorneys, and they can use it for filing your divorce. The second best, if that won't work, or one of the parents is not willing to work with a mental health counselor to do that, would be to use amicable attorneys who are focused on helping the couple have the most amicable process as much as possible. And I would recommend the Amicable Divorce Network to find attorneys who have a process where they can help couples get through the divorce in the most amicable way possible. If that is not an option because of one or both of the parents are not willing to do that, then the third best option is to use attorneys who do not operate in an amicable way. This would be sort of your typical divorce attorney. If you want to know whether attorneys fall into that category, you would look at their website maybe, and you might see things like "we fight for our clients" or "we get our clients what they deserve," those kinds of statements. Generally, in my opinion, they're the worst kind of attorneys to really use because ultimately you potentially are creating a lot of animosity and negativity and toxicity through the divorce process. So again, and if you're going to use attorneys, it would be best, in my opinion, to use the mediation process or mediator to help you with the parenting plans rather than just having attorneys go back and forth. So to recap, in my opinion, the best way to do it, develop a parenting plan, is with a mental health professional. Second best is using amicable attorneys. And third best is to use attorneys that do not operate in an amicable way. The next section I want to talk about is a little bit about what parts of the parenting plan are going to be the most helpful. One is the best parenting plans. Number one is they are balanced between parents, including custody, parenting time, and final say areas, powers of influence in terms of whether mom or dad has more or less influence over kids' outcomes. So just because it's balanced doesn't mean it's equal, as in sometimes parenting time is not exactly 50-50, but I do recommend that it become as balanced as possible, because most of the time both parents want to be involved with their kids' lives, and most of the time it is helpful for the kids to have both parents involved with them post-divorce. And also, if it feels more balanced to the parents, then there's going to be less power struggles, less conflict that arise in the parenting plan. The second quality of a good parenting plan is that they're very specific and clear in terms of the expectations and the contract and the agreements related to parenting time and a lot of other areas. If there's less clarity in the parenting plan, then potentially there's more risks in the future of conflictual issues or misunderstandings about agreements. And so you want them to be very, very specific and clear. So instead of saying, mom will be with the child mom will be with the child on Mother's Day, it might say something like, well, mom will be with the children between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. on Mother's Day. And then at 4 p.m., mom will bring the kids to the dad's house and drop them off. So you want it to be very specific and clear. The third part of a parenting plan that's really important is that, in my opinion, the parents need to be intimately involved in creating them and feel a sense of ownership. We all, especially when it comes to children, have strong emotions about those areas. And if we feel like someone else, whether it be the other parent or the other attorney or the court system, tell us what to do or what not to do with our parenting, we tend to push back a little bit on that. And it can create a lot of negativity, and basically, generally, it's less likely for parents to follow through with the parenting agreement if they don't feel like they're intimately involved in creating it and feel a sense of ownership. Doesn't mean that you're going to get your way 100%, but if you feel like there's helpful compromise in it, then it's a good parenting plan. And then the fourth best parenting plan strategy would be to have develop a parental mission statement at the beginning of the parenting plan. When I do parenting plans, that's the first thing we work on. It basically guides the parents in the process of the divorce and also guides them with co-parenting post-divorce. It may say things like, we agree as parents to put our children first. We agree to speak to each other respectfully through the process and beyond, those kinds of things. But a parental mission statement is very, very helpful in parenting plans. Now, I want to talk about a little bit about why I believe the best practice is to use a counselor to develop parenting plans. One is because counselors generally specialize in communication and conflict resolution. A lot of people have training in that, but generally counselors specialize in those areas. And as you can probably imagine, communication skills and conflict resolution skills are extremely important in not only developing a parenting plan, but also in co-parenting. The second reason why it's good to use a counselor is to help the parents practice co-parenting skills during the process of developing a parenting plan with the counselor. So while you're developing the parenting plan, you have the potential and the opportunity to practice communicating between the parents have opportunity to practice communicating with each other and learning how to communicate with each other in productive ways that will not only help the process of developing a parenting plan, but also hopefully spill over into post-divorce parenting, co-parenting interactions. The third benefit of using a counselor would be is because the less professionals involved or the less people involved, the less potential misunderstandings. If you have a traditional situation, you've got two attorneys, you've got two parents. Sometimes the parents aren't talking with each other. Sometimes they're talking through attorneys. Attorneys are talking with their clients. Sometimes you add another person, a mediation person. So then you have 5 people involved. And the more people involved, the more likely misunderstandings, and misunderstandings can obviously lead to negative feelings towards each other. The fourth benefit would be when you work with a counselor, it really is the focus on collaboration and compromise rather than negotiation and power struggles. Sometimes in divorce situation, there's power struggles between the attorneys and their clients and the other attorney and their client, trying to push and pull and get most for their client and most for themselves. And so it becomes a negotiation and a power struggle versus a collaboration and compromise. And generally, negotiation and power struggles are not necessarily helpful for the process of developing a parenting plan, and certainly possibly post-divorce is not necessarily bring good feelings towards each other in terms of co-parenting. The last, I think, that's really important benefits using a counselor for parenting plans is that more likely if they're developing a parenting plan with the counselor, they are more likely to feel ownership of it, and then it's more likely to follow the parenting plan agreement. I mentioned that earlier too. So there are a bunch of different counselors out there that have skills in this area. In a little bit, you'll hear from Stephanie. She's an example of a person who has had training in developing parenting plans and has done a bunch of them. I know that. My wife, Tracy, has also done a bunch of parenting plans. I myself do that a lot. So if you look for those kinds of skills, then you'll find that in some specific counselors. As far as upside down divorce, I'll give you kind of a quick snippet of it. Basically, the process is where couples start with a counselor and develop a parenting plan. And then once they're finished and having a document of a parenting plan, then they get handed off to someone like Lisa, who is a financial specialist. And, the couple works with Lisa or somebody like Lisa to develop their financial agreement. And then once they have a parenting plan and a financial agreement, then we pass them off to an attorney or attorneys to kind of go over all the documents and then file the paperwork. It's called an upside down process because generally, historically, people have started with attorneys in terms of the process. And in this process, you actually end with attorneys. So if you have any questions about that, certainly you can contact me. And that's all I got.
Excellent, Andrew. Thank you so much. And yes, it's been a pleasure working with you and Tracy on so many of those upside down cases. And we know that works for some folks and others need other avenues. But when it works well. So next up, we have Georgia Lord. And Georgia is a family law and disability rights attorney, and she represents persons facing such family transitions as divorce and disputes regarding child custody, child support, and alimony. She also regularly serves as a guardian ad litem, and I'll let you explain what that is, Georgia, appointed by the court to represent the best interest of children in the middle of custody disputes. And Georgia is proud to offer both collaborative and conventional law services to both traditional and non-traditional families. She has not only assisted numerous parents with custody claims arising from same-sex relationships, but has also instructed lawyers and judges on the legal principles governing this rapidly changing area of the law. So welcome to the webinar, Georgia, and I'm so excited to have you here to share your expertise. And I will say that the fact that you are also a disability rights attorney is very interesting because we see that many cases where there are children with disabilities, we have higher rates of divorce, unfortunately. And I'm sure that you're able to help those families in a great way with that. So I'm going to let you take it from here and
Okay.
let us know all about your area of expertise.
Okay. Let me see. Are you seeing the first slide of my PowerPoint? Oh dear.
We are. It's great.
Okay, great. Sorry. New technology for me, so I'm okay. As has been explained by Andrew, parenting plan is one of the required parts of a divorce case that involves minor children. The things that are set out in the parenting plan are the legal custody, how that's divided between the parents or other caregivers, the questions of who has parenting time and when, and also any rules that apply for the parenting time. Parenting plans are drafted, as Andrew indicated. First of all, there's most typically and best is to have the parents reach agreement and through one method or another upon the terms of a parenting plan. Family courts have found that typically if parents are able to get past their feelings of frustration, anger with the other one and reach agreement on a plan, it tends to be a plan that works better than one that's imposed by a third party, a judge or other or arbitrator or whatever. Now, if the parents are not able to reach agreement, then the court will draft the plan. Okay, so when you're negotiating the terms of a parenting plan with the other parent, do you need to have an attorney? Well, yes and no. Of course, as has been described, sometimes people start with a counselor to do it. Other times, lots of courts, typically family courts nowadays, have forms that can be used by people who don't have attorneys or who have not gotten guidance from a professional to draft their own plan. And, they can cover the bases, but there's shortcomings in going about it that way. And so it depends. Part of what an attorney can bring to the mix is just a sense of what possibilities are out there, not something above and beyond the typical kinds of structures that may be in the forms or that maybe the counselor's most familiar with or the mediator you're dealing with is most familiar with. Family lawyers see lots and lots and lots of families go through this stuff. I worked for Fulton Family Division for 6 years. And I saw lots and lots of cases. And I saw lots and lots of cases in which things had gone horribly wrong and the court was trying to sort it out and fix it and try to protect the welfare of the children and also the parties. So that experience in seeing what types of things people have used, different structures they've used, and also what can go wrong is very helpful in helping to craft a parenting plan. So I guess I would... and this is some of the things, parenting plans can be very flexible. There's lots of ways in which they can vary to meet the needs of your extended family, your newly configured family. And I guess one thing I would caution, and possibly to have a different spin on than Andrew did, is I think it's a mistake to go through an entire process of working through a parenting plan and then present it to the lawyer and say something like, write it up. Because at that point, the lawyer often can either offer other possibilities that may not have been thought of or spot potential problems. And at that point, the couple may be, look, we're done. We don't want to deal with this anymore. We don't want to keep talking about it. But the lawyer's like, no, really, this is a concern. You need to address this. So I would suggest that if you start with a counselor, it's best to have an interactive process where at least periodically the counselor or the parties are touching base with lawyers with their counsel to see if there are concerns like that or ideas that could be constructive. Okay, one of the things that comes up, a increasingly common structure is to have like a 50-50 or almost even split of parenting time. Traditionally, lots of judges are very hesitant about it because they see it as too disruptive for the child. As a judge I used to work for said, you hate to see a little kid packing up their suitcase to go live, shuttling back and forth between one set of neighborhood friends and the other, etc. But It's increasingly popular as an option. Now, I would caution people who are considering this option to consider whether they're thinking of it out of a desire to protect their rights as an individual parent. Is ego involved in this? Are they seeking to feel vindicated? Are they truly thinking of what circumstances will help their children thrive? Some children adapt very well to this, others do not. Some sets of parents, it's just not practical. Maybe they live too far apart. Maybe their household rules are just too radically different. You have to think about whether this will work for the children involved. Okay, other options. Just a wide range of options. For instance, instead of every other weekend, maybe Thursday through Monday on the weekend. Maybe you have a dinner night thrown in. Lots of adaptations. What if the parents live far apart? These are challenging. That can be a challenging situation, particularly with very young children. So often there's time in the summer that's built in or during more holidays so that the parent who lives far away can try to get some more time then. But you also have to consider, is that workable for the child? Okay, holidays and vacations. Lots of times parenting plans have the standard holidays and vacations, but maybe those are not the ones that your family celebrates. Maybe you have a different set of religious holidays. Maybe those are not a big deal in your family. The point is to craft something that makes sense for your family. Here's a couple of things that often I've got a laundry list of things that I ask people, do you need a provision about this, that, or the other? Sometimes people do, other times they need a very simple one. Sometimes they don't really need one at all because they don't anticipate any problems will occur. So here's just a couple of things that can come up. And one thought is particularly if you have a very young child or children, you may want to consider building in some changes for the future, because a plan that is good for a 3-year-old is unlikely to be good for a 15-year-old. So that's something to consider. Okay, as I mentioned, one of the things lawyers can do, I think, because we see situations that have gone wrong, we read cases about things that have gone wrong, are to look for potential problems. One of the things I always look for are how one parent can get stuck with costs that they did not anticipate. For instance, if one parent has the full authority to select a method of childcare and to select a childcare provider, and the other parent is required to pay either half or some percentage, all of the cost, that can be a concern, because the parent doing the selecting may have more means than the other parent. They may be more extravagant than the other parent. A system that could be set up to allow that one parent to be extravagant at the cost of the other. On the other hand, there may be disagreement over what's a reasonable expenditure and what's not. So that needs to be thought about, and maybe guardrails put into place on what's spent. These types of things need to be anticipated. To some extent, you have to predict the future, which is always an inexact science. Then there's some other things that may seem like a good idea now, but often, family law attorneys have found they become a problem later. For instance, one example of that is provisions that say that you won't introduce the children to the boyfriend or girlfriend or significant other, or they won't spend the night, or that type of provision. That typically seems like a great idea when people are first divorced. But a couple of years down the road, when they're dating, they often come back to their lawyers and say, can we change this, because this doesn't really work anymore. So, think of that through. Try to be realistic. As Andrew mentioned, you need to have clarity, and both to guide the parties so there's not disputes, and also if there is a dispute so that the court can enforce an agreement. But you can't provide for everything. That's impossible. You'd end up with an encyclopedia and not be able to keep track of what's in there and what's not. So you need some breathing room for the agreement. Well, it's a balance to be struck. Okay, this is just one of my little things that I think is a good idea. There, as Andrew mentioned, there needs to be several parts to the documents that are done when a couple divorces who has children. One is the financial part, the settlement agreement. Another is the parenting plan, and then there's also a child support addendum and child support worksheets that set out that. Sometimes people put those all together in one big document, and that's certainly, proper. It can be done that way. Everything's in one place. But my experience is that it's better to have these things separate. And the reason for that is, let's suppose you need to give your parenting plan to your child's school or your child's therapist or whatever. Well, it's helpful to be able to just give them the parenting plan and not drag them into all your financial business and, have them seeing who got what piece of furniture or whatever. It just seems simpler to be able to give people the parts that they need as opposed to everything about your divorce situation. So that's just a preference of mine. So, and one thing I think it's good to keep in mind is, as was mentioned, this process of negotiating a parenting plan, it can either lay a positive or a negative framework for your future relations as co-parents. And lots of these things, if you can use the process to develop some of these skills now, as this happens in collaborative practice, that can help to create a positive foundation. Down the road, you're going to be hopefully going to your child's college graduation or their wedding or other just important occasions for your family. And you don't want to put your children in a situation where they're wondering whether there'll be a big scene or thinking about, well, gee, I can't spend more than 5 minutes with mom if I spend 5 minutes with dad or whatever. You don't want your children to be in that position. So just keep in mind as you're laying the groundwork for your co-parenting relationship, that you will be parents together for the rest of your lives.
Thank you so much, Georgia. That was a wonderful presentation. Lots of great information there, and wise experience as well. I think you've heard from Andrew and now from Georgia that there are different ways to go about this. And I believe, as Georgia said, that combining the best of both worlds, and I would say 3 worlds actually, the legal, the financial, and the emotional, which includes the parenting plan. When you bring in the experts to collaborate, cooperate, and work those plans together, those agreements together in whatever order you choose, but doing them collaboratively and doing them cooperatively, you will come out with the best outcomes. So thank you so much, Georgia. And next, last but definitely not least, we have Stephanie Robbins. And Stephanie, if you'll turn your camera on, there we go. Stephanie is a licensed clinical social worker with over 20 years of experience working with individuals, couples, and families. She has a thriving therapy private practice in Alpharetta, Georgia, and she is a parenting educator, speaker, trainer, parenting coordinator, and mediator. So you also bring a wealth of knowledge, and I'm so excited that you're going to be talking about making the most of your alone time. So another great perspective. It's not all bad to have the kids out for a little while. So Stephanie, welcome, and you'll take it from here.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm glad to be here today. We've heard both Andrew and Georgia talking about the parenting plans and different times with your kids and not. I'm definitely going to talk about making the most of your time without your kids, and also making the most of the time when you do have your kids. First of all, actually, I'm trying to see if the slides being shown. There. Okay, sorry. My first slide has a quote that I like. It says, "Life is tough, my darling, but so are you." So I'd like you to remember when your kids are with the other parent that you might feel alone, but you're really not alone. They'll be coming back sooner than you can think. It's pretty quick when they have their time away. But loneliness is temporary. Everyone has worries about being alone. We have worries of wanting to have somebody care for us or for us to care for someone else. We have this human nature desire for connection and to belong. So when we feel like we're alone, we start panicking, maybe getting sad, angry, or like frustrated. There is definitely a difference between being having solitude time, and that's time for yourself where you can recharge and kind of work on yourself to be a better person, a better parent, versus loneliness, which is more of like sadness. If we focus more on the loneliness, we're actually being more self-focused. And if you're more self-focused, again, you might be more likely to have fears, anger, more of that isolation. Ways to get through the loneliness is also to give back. Some people choose to do things like volunteering or helping out others or just listening to a friend that can combat the loneliness. The next slide is self-care is one of the ways that you can actually enjoy your solitude when you don't have the kids with you. Every time when people bring up self-care, I think of bubble baths and manicures. So today I wanted to bring up several creative ideas that you may have not thought were self-care or things that you may or may not have tried. These are things that I'd like you to integrate into your life. I have an activity that I do with my clients when I see them. I feel like you need to have a balance of 6 different areas for self-care. There's the professional, physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, and personal. And I'm going to give you different things for each category that you can do to refill that bucket of self-care. For instance, for the professional or working, being able to take care of yourself by saying, like giving limits, setting boundaries with your work hours, taking a lunch. A lot of people will sit at their desk and eat through their lunch. Maybe coming into work a little bit early or stay a little bit later 1 or 2 days a week. Definitely set up your hours. Let your boss know. Let your other colleagues know when you're going to be there and when you're not, so that you can have these special self-care times that you can actually end at work and then do things after work. When you're at work, also learn to start saying no to things. A lot of times people will take on too many tasks and overdo it. Learning to say no is really good for setting boundaries. The self-care for physical self-care is like healthy eating, exercising, just making sure that you feel your best, look your best. A lot of times people can get haircuts or definitely the manicures. Massages are a great way to self-nurture, feel really good about yourself. And then also just getting around your friends, going out for margaritas, going out to dinner, going to movies. Psychologically, some ideas are reflecting on yourself, reflecting on your life, evaluate some things that you had done in the past, but also look forward towards your goals for the future. Definitely psychologically, sitting out in nature, being in the sun is helpful. I would suggest a lot of my clients, when they go through a divorce, their community kind of changes. So making new friends is needed, or when you are feeling alone, finding ways to get out in public. Now that with the pandemic, people are getting more vaccinations and starting to go out more, people are starting to do more meeting in groups, like hiking groups or meetups, different creative things, can go to pottery places just to meet new people, make some new friends. And then for emotional self-care ideas, doing daily affirmations, positive affirmations, making them positive. Instead of thinking negative, think positive things that you want in your life, certain goals. Also apply self-forgiveness. You want to, anything that you feel guilty about, or if you feel bad about, especially with the divorce or not being with your kids, or just some things that you might have had in the past, just be more forgiving to yourself. That's a wonderful way of being more emotionally self-care. Sing, dance, with the spiritual, maybe get more involved with your church community, do yoga, really work on like a vision board of what you want your goals to be. Try to also volunteer, be inspirational, find something you're passionate about. And then the last category is personal self-care ideas. And this is like rediscovering yourself. Who you were when you were married is different than who you are now as divorced. You want to do what you want in your life. Try to hone into those goals, be more specific, get out of debt, start connecting more with your family and friends, start learning to a new like guitar or a new passion or sport. I have a lot of clients who start something that they never thought they could do, and then when they don't have their kids, they actually have that time to do that. So take your time when you don't have your kids to really work on yourself, rebuild yourself, so when your kids do come back, then you're charged and you're able to be there with them. So the last picture that I had was actually my dog. He's a therapy dog that comes to my office. I also wanted to explain that with self-care, cuddling with pets is a wonderful way for good self-care. In this slide, I have a picture of my daughter and I. We do a lot of things together, such as pottery classes, hanging out, watching TVs and movies. But I wanted to talk about making the most of your time with your children. Look more at the quality time instead of the quantity. Don't count days. I have parents that come in my office and say, I only have 4 days a month or 8 days a month. Well, that's like making it where it's so limiting. Be more abundant and think about, gosh, I had this whole weekend. Put it more at a bigger scale. It's really the time that you have with them, not the amount of time. Be intentional with your kids. Be there, be present. A lot of times when we're stressed going through the divorce process or rebuilding our new life after divorce, we kind of dissociate. We start thinking about other things. We're not really being present, being mindful. So be more intentional in things you say and things you do. And remember, the kids are always watching and listening. When you are talking to your kids, really, really listen to what they're saying. Listen to how their body language says. A lot of times kids will say things that they'll say one thing, but their body language shows something else. And just being there, making it present. Stop what you're doing. Put the dishes down. Stop folding laundry. Just sitting down with them. Also, but like at bedtime, be right before bed is a great time for kids to talk about their day and what's going on, maybe possibly worries. Carve out time with your kids. Like I was saying, you might have multiple new responsibilities. If you're newly single, you had a partner in the past that you were married to that helped out with things, but now that you're doing a lot yourself, carve out some time that you can just be with your kids. Make it either right before bedtime or right after dinner, or maybe right when they get home from school. That designated time, do 10 to 15 minutes of playtime if they're younger. If they're older, you can actually make a snack with them, sit with them. Kids actually do better when food is around. If there's food around, they're more likely to talk. And basically sitting there, not asking grilling questions or interviewing them, just let them talk about their day. Leave some of the questions, be more open-ended, where they don't have things like, well, how was your day? It was okay. Or they just say, fine. Do more open-ended so that they can talk more about what's going on. Don't do yes or no questions. One of the activities that I work a lot with my families on is called brainstorming activities with Post-it notes. If you're like not sure what you should do with your kids, like on the weekends or what to do, each family member gets a different Post-it note and different colors, and you can have them write down categories like go to festivals, go hear a band, go movie, go out to dinner, and then put it on a wall. And then everybody looks at it and puts them in categories of things that they want to do, maybe ranking them like, oh, this would be fun, or goals for like vacations and things like that. Brainstorming these activities, another way to connect with your kids. Kids love hearing stories about their childhood and their life. Sometimes they want to hear about stories about yourself when you were a child, or about when they were with their grandparents and this and that. So those are really good things for connecting. Also, one of the things I wrote on here was print pictures. My daughter one day said, oh, we don't do anything. I'm bored. We never do anything. And I said, oh my goodness, I have a documentation of all the pictures of everything we've done. So I realized that, everything is so digital focused right now that we don't print pictures out. So I actually went to Costco and printed out 500 pictures from when she was like 0 to 12. And now we go through the albums and talk about memories. And I realized there's some things in life that I remember that she doesn't remember, or we talk about it and she jogs my memory. And the last thing to connect with your kids is do things like cook, bake, and create. I found getting like HelloFresh meals, making those meals together as a family is good. It teaches healthy eating and then healthy living, and just teaching them how to cook. It's any time that you can spend with them is the best way to connect with them. So instead of focusing when you don't have them, when you do have them, take the most of your time and spend time with them. And that's all my presentation.
Wonderful. Great ideas. Thank you. So fun. I'm thinking of some ideas with my grandchildren. So absolutely terrific. So thank you so much to the speakers here. If everyone would come back on camera, and I think we may have some questions from the chat, and then we'll see if anyone wants to go ahead and open up the call to other questions. Please, this is your time for our audience. If you have anything you want to ask of others. Marcella, I think I saw a question here, but I'm not finding it now. Could you go back and look at that?
I have it.
Okay, great.
Yes. We had someone who had a question about attorneys. It says, is there any option for couples who would like to complete a divorce without either person being represented by an attorney, or have an attorney that will help with filing without representing anyone or representing both?
Well, you can, as I mentioned, that most courts have form. When I worked for Fulton, like many courts, lots of people who go through there have no attorneys. About 75% of the people who go through family court. And so there's definite disadvantages to doing it that way, but it can be done, particularly if you're willing to sit down and read through this mound of paperwork and put up with some, stops and starts along the way. Because it's like anything else where you're negotiating a foreign terrain, you aren't going to do it perfectly the first time, but it can definitely be done. But can you do it with one attorney one attorney cannot represent both people. That's an impermissible conflict of interest. An attorney can represent one of the parties, and there can be a fair amount of sharing of information between the parties. Okay, so that's one way it's sometimes done. But an attorney cannot represent both parties at the same time.
I thought this would be good, Lisa, explaining a little bit more about the process, like through either the upside down way or starting with the financial fundamentals, and how we bring the attorney in kind of towards the end of the process to make sure the legal I's are dotted and T's are crossed.
Yes, I know there's a lot of folks who want to save money in this process, and it can be very costly depending on how acrimonious things get. But you definitely want to be very careful here, because once those settlement agreements are signed, you're going to live with the terms of that, or have to pay for costly modifications if it's at all possible. And there's also the emotional toll to that we haven't added on here. I mean, what is that emotional toll worth to any of us to avoid? Certainly consider that, to have to continue this legal battle for years on end because it wasn't done right the first time. So as I said before, looking at it at a minimum of consulting with the right legal folks for your particular situation. So, if you're looking for an amicable type divorce, you don't want to go find an attorney who may have been recommended by your neighbor's sister's best friend, unless that attorney is a right fit for you, because that attorney their case may have been very contentious, and that attorney may be a bulldog, and rightfully so for that case. But if you're not looking for that type of experience and you get that type of attorney, it may not go well for you. So select your counsel very carefully to be in sync with your needs and the needs of your spouse. Both of you should select carefully, because if one of you doesn't choose an effective attorney for your needs, then both of you are going to end up in the same position. So I will say that right from the start. You also want to look at, should we start with the parenting plan and consult with attorneys along the way? That was mentioned, and that's perfectly fine. And a lot of people come to me first and do the financials first. And I always have clients consult with attorneys along the way, because I can't answer legal questions. But when you put this bundle together, where you have the legal, the financial, and the emotional support of whatever your needs are, whether it's just getting therapy or whether it's doing the parenting plan, and sometimes you add in the mediator for those things that you just can't agree upon, you really get a much better outcome. You and or your spouse are more in the driver's seat. You're driving this process forward. You are in control. You are controlling the amount of money that is being spent as well. And it's a much different flavor and a much better way to go about it if you can get both parties to be on board. Now, if
Lisa, if I can add just one thought about one example. Say, for instance, one of the issues that comes up is whether one of the parents should provide financial support for college. Okay, that not an unreasonable thing in certain circumstances. If the person who's agreeing to do that is my client, I would prefer they know from the beginning, before they negotiate with anybody about that term, that there is a Georgia court cannot require them to do that unless they volunteer to do it. Okay, so before they agree to do it, I think they should know it's their right to say yes or no. And I also think they should soberly consider, what about the how much risk is there that their income may go down significantly and make that a hardship. That's just an example.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I wanted to butt in here just a minute, because the person that asked about this question mentioned that they've already kind of agreed to everything, and they don't want to bring in anybody they don't need to. So I just wanted to speak to that, because it is possible to sit down with another person and agree to everything. In that situation, though, because divorce is a legal process, and eventually the agreement will be a legal agreement. I know Lisa typically recommends that an attorney review it. Make sure that it's sound, because otherwise there's just so much risk there. One thing worded wrong can cost you a fortune.
Yeah. Yep. And we, again, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but none of us are experts in all the areas. That's why we have experts from different areas on this call. And every time we do these webinars, it's important that you get expert advice from the right experts. And so when I'm working with folks, yes, absolutely. Here's some ideas from the financial perspective, but now we need to have an attorney review that. Take this to your attorneys and look at this and say, is this working right? Are there any other aspects that we need to know? What do we need to bring in to make this legally sound? And, from the parenting plan, what other aspects do we need to know there? So the gist of all of this and the takeaway for everyone listening is that you have different options and you have more control than you think. So make sure you've got the right team picked out and on your team to give you the best advice to carry you through this process and beyond. Because the last thing you want to do is get on the other side and have more problems. And from a financial perspective, like Georgia giving and I'll let you speak in just a moment, Andrew. From a financial perspective, I'm going to give you a scenario of many times clients come to me after their divorce and say, and these are not clients I've worked with, but folks come to me after their divorce and say, I've been ordered to refinance the house, but it can't qualify. Because no one looked at that pre-divorce. Yeah. And so they didn't, go and get pre-qualified. They didn't structure alimony to meet the parameters that are needed for the pre-qualification. They didn't have enough time frame for the alimony. So if they had consulted with the financial advisor, the divorce financial planner, along with the attorney who put that in writing, they might have a completely different outcome. I've had people who have had to spend more post-divorce to fix things like this than they spent before the divorce. Andrew, please share something here.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback on what you are saying, and that is that sometimes we don't know what we don't know. And most people aren't experts in divorce, thank goodness. Yeah. So When you think of a parenting plan, you can go online, you can search for a parenting plan, but there's a lot of elements to it that you want to just make sure for your benefit are in there, as well as the financial part. It's kind of like the difference between, yes, I can have TurboTax do my taxes to save money on an accountant, but if I hire an accountant, they could actually save me more money on my taxes than what the accountant's going to cost. So when you talk about financial cost long term and emotional cost for you and your children, I think you want to be considering, do I want at least some people who are experts in these areas to look over it to make sure that it's the best possible situation for you? Because oftentimes we're talking about, 10 to 15 year contracts, essentially. If your kid is 5 years old, that's a 13-year contract that you're making with your ex-spouse, financially as well as emotionally and parental. So if you're going into it recognizing that it may be worth an investment in some time and some money to make sure you'll get potentially a huge return on your investment emotionally in your whole family as well as financially also. So I just want to add to that.
Good points. Good points. Stephanie, any parting words here? I'm not sure if we have any more questions. And thank you, Angie Rykoff. We are thankful for your comment. You are all awesome. And Angie is also one of our Divorce Town members who'll be speaking in another upcoming webinar. But what about you, Stephanie? Anything you want to add to this? Words of wisdom?
With the parenting plan stuff, just look at it as keep it child focused, make sure that everything is written tight, make sure that drop off and different times are specified. Those are really important. A lot of times there's confusions of certain things. So definitely want to have a professional look over it. Also, the parenting plan is more of a skeletal model. It doesn't mean you have to follow it to the T if you can co-parent together. So having that flexibility, but going with the whole self-care and taking care of yourself. If you do that, you'll become a better parent and your kids will be happy and healthier. So that's my parting words.
Very good. Very good. And, one more financial tip on that end is that, if you do have a 50-50 parenting plan that you're working out, there may be a way, if there's more than one child, for both spouses to receive head of household status so that you are saving in taxes. So right there could be the potential to save thousands of, even tens of thousands of dollars in taxes over the years that you are parenting. So again, speaking with each individual expert on their area of expertise, one little tip can save you a lot of money or a lot of heartache or a lot of potential conflict in the future. So anybody want to say anything else here? I do see another comment, private comment. Marcella, if you want to address that.
Yes. So it is here about I'll just read it. It isn't about financial cost. It's more about the neutrality of what we have agreed to the point of what courts can and cannot do. You're getting a divorce, but you should be committed to what you want for your kids. I think everyone here agrees with that 100%. Kids first, and then everything else after that. The lawyer that gives you extra space to remove that commitment, like not paying for it. So she's disagreeing with not maybe removing the option for taking care of kids for things like college expenses or that sort of thing. I don't think that George is suggesting that parents not be committed to their children's future. I think she wants to make sure that legally they understand their rights and responsibilities, because there's moral, legal, and emotional responsibilities when it comes to parenting and divorce. And it is important that a person understands all of them.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at, is I think before making that commitment, it's important for someone to know what their rights are and also to think through the consequences, as opposed to, promising to do something when they're sitting there across the table looking into the eyes of the other parent of their children. I've seen cases where people, wrote out an agreement on a napkin or something and then one of them went to court later and tried to enforce it, and the terms are vague and they didn't, whatever. That can be a big mess too. Okay. So that's what I was trying to say. It's better to go to, if that's a big commitment, so make it with your eyes open.
Absolutely. And from a financial standpoint, you want to determine if that's even feasible. Is it possible? And, if there are means, definitely want to have that written into a separate agreement, because colleges will look at your divorce settlement agreement, and you don't really want them to know all the other terms, and like we talked about in other aspects. And in some aspects as well of divorce, it does benefit children if the lower wage earner is the one who has primary custody, because then the financial aid will be based on that. So again, there are multiple levels of things that need to be looked at here. And, it is not something in our state of Georgia that is required. But, we have had cases where there are means for that. But again, you want to make sure that you are working with experts who can cover all of the aspects of that and get you the best outcome possible for yourself, your family, your finances, and your future. Okay, well, you are welcome. We're happy that we could give you some clarity around that. And so I don't think we have any more questions, and we are at the top of the hour. So I want to thank my guest here, Andrew Mcconaughey and Georgia Lord and Stephanie Robbins, and they can all be found at divorcetownusa.com, where you'll find more articles and information there to help you with many more aspects of your divorce. We also want to let you know that we are hosting support group meetings now. These are free to the public, and we hold them on Thursdays at 12 p.m. You can see the dates here, and Fridays at 7 p.m. once a month. And more webinars to come. And we've got a lot of great information coming up for you. So we thank you for joining us today or listening in later on the replay. And we wish you all a safe journey through your divorce. Until next time, take care.